Hello, this is Ben Welsh, and welcome back to First Python Notebook. In this next chapter, I'm going to show you how to take a data frame that you've read into Python, done whatever you're going to do. In our case, we created a ranking of helicopter accident rates, and to take that data table and to take it out of Python after you've done all your work on it and write it to your computer as a spreadsheet file that you could share with your colleagues, maybe to make a graphic, maybe to have them inspect it to look for issues, maybe to vet and send to a source, or whatever else you're going to do as part of your process, all the things that happen outside of Project Jupyter. And so read CSV was the method you may remember from very early on in the class that we used to read in a comma delimited file of comma separated values. Remember, that's what CSV stands for. The read CSV method was what we used from the PD tool to read in a spreadsheet from outside our system. So to export out of our system, we use a method called toCSV, what I'm going to teach you here today. And the way to use that is you start with your data frame. In our case, that's what the one we made in our last class segment, which is called ranked underscore list. And so if you hit the dot method, any data frame, whether you use it or not, has a method waiting for you right there called toCSV, open parenthesis, close parenthesis. And so I'd like you to type that in and hit play. And what you'll see is a not very useful string of text, but this is effectively the CSV file ready to be written out to your file system. It's just in this case, since we haven't told it where to deposit the file, it's just printed it here in our notebook. And so the key input to the toCSV method is the location of where you would like it to write out the file. And the default location on any system is just the current directory, wherever your notebook is. And so if I just type in here accident rate ranking.csv, and you could name the file anything, of course, right? It should park this file next to my notebook in the file system. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that. You should too, and hit play. Now, as you may recall from early on when we were learning our way around the notebook, we can go to the View menu and we can ask to see the file browser, which will help us look around our computer. And if I click over there, we can see that I actually have to check up to one directory here because of how this computer is configured. It's a little bit of a flaw. We can see that that right there, written to the file system, is the accident rate ranking table. And I can click on that, and here in Jupyter, it's capable of printing out the data table right there. And we see that each column has been properly parsed, and it's a CSV that's ready to go. Now, we do see one strange thing. We see that there's this odd kind of junk column of numbers on the left-hand side. That is another bit of kind of pandas foo that you need to learn. I go back to my notebook, which got put in this separate documents directory in a little bit of a mismatch. And we can see that that index is always been printed out every time we print the data frame. And that's just a row counter that tells us this is the sort of incremental row within the table. And by default, toCSV is going to include that in the table. And so one thing I often do when I'm writing out to CSV is I put index equals false as another option. And what that does is it just tells pandas, hey, you know what? You can just exclude that index column when you're writing it out. If I hit play and rerun it, and I go back and look at the file, it might need to be reopened a different way, I think, but it definitely is not there. We can confirm that by going into my file system to my home directory. There's the file. I can then say open this file with Microsoft Excel, which is now bouncing down here at the bottom. Very exciting as we wait. And we can see that yes, our data table has been read in and is ready to go as a spreadsheet, and that index column has been shaved off. This file, with a little bit of cleanup, would be ready to take and upload to Data Wrapper and maybe make a nice bar chart, right? It would be ready to send to any of your colleagues for them to review the results. You might want to clean it up a bit, but it's now exported outside the system and ready to go. Now we saw there that I had a little bit of confusion about where the file got saved. And I think that's just due to Jupyter Desktop thinking that my home directory is where things are based. But early on in this class, I had moved my notebook into the documents directory. And so when I told it to write out the file, it put it in what Jupyter Desktop sees as the home, which is the root of my system. That's a little awkward. And so one way around that is oftentimes just to include the full path to where your file might want to go. So for instance, on your computer, if you start with a slash and you give it the complete path to where you want it to write a file, rather than the relative path to where you want it based on the location of your notebook, that can make life quite a bit easier, you know. And this is a little bit one of the downsides of installing and using Jupyter Desktop without a lot of configuration, is our files are kind of just being thrown into the root of our computer without a lot of discernment. And it's not covered in the course of this class, though you can find much more information about it in the appendix where we cover advanced installation techniques. This is a reason why many advanced Jupyter users use more complicated and advanced methods for installing and configuring Jupyter on a per project basis. So say for every single story, you might install Jupyter separately so that all your files and folders don't get mixed up. Because if you become a dedicated Jupyter user, which I consider myself, you could end up having dozens or even hundreds of different Jupyter projects. And whether you want to arrange those all in one place, as Jupyter Desktop does, or come up with a different arrangement for organizing things, is really entirely up to you. But it's when you're doing tricks like this, is reading and writing files, that might get a little bit complicated. And so we saw that myself bump into that right here. And with that, I think we've reached the end of this chapter. I hope it's been useful, and I'll see you in the next one.